All right, time for a forecast. So let's take a look actually at the dollar first, of course, on the forecast list. Let's see what we are doing. So currently it's a tricky situation, as in we mentioned the 4-hour fair gap that is sitting right there yesterday. It seems like we don't want to continue lower off of that. So what is the next line of defense that we are creating? It's the daily fair gap that we are having right there. So high chance that we are going to come into the daily fair value gap right there to potentially continue lower. Again, that is what I would like to see overall. If that daily fair value gap doesn't push lower, then again, we need to take into account the potential fair value gaps that we are creating as well on the weekly. So let's see what price wants to do. Overall, that is quite nice. It's looking quite nice. Then on ES, NASDAQ, and YM right here, we're currently just seeing absolutely horrendous price action, if I'm being honest. Now, we do have some movement right here, which is quite nice to see. Again, I would argue right here that if we again want to continue lower, then we can head towards the weekly fair value gap that is sitting right there. We finally have some extra volatility, and as we can see, we are actually creating fair value gaps right now, which could be quite nice to actually push lower. Would I bet money on it? As in, would I take a trade? Right there, no. Personally, not really. I'm not really confident in taking a trade on the indices right now. Just don't really like it myself. Could be, of course, that we're approaching the end of the year and that we're seeing this price action. So hopefully it clears up as well a little bit heading into December. Could be quite nice. But overall, my best bet would again be overall bullish, which is pretty clear. But do we first want to come into the weekly value to then continue higher, or do we just want to mess around right there before we actually continue higher? Same for YM, and DAX right here is finally delivering higher. Overall, again, the price action just hasn't been really nice. If we can get a daily value gap here to finally push higher, then overall that could be quite nice. Australian dollar, US dollar. So here again, we have reached those targets for the week, you could argue, where price now might want to gravitate towards that daily fair value gap that is sitting right there. So how can we deliver there? Well, potentially, if we get some nice price action lower, we can definitely look to deliver there for by this 4-hour fair value gap that can push price lower as well. Could overall be nice. Do I like it? No, and I do think Australian dollar, US dollar is overall also ready for the breakdown list right there. Let's see EU. EU did not, or excuse me, a very small fair value gap again being created right there higher. Again, I am still more so considering the weekly fair value gap. It seems like price is lacking that momentum higher right now. It's just not really convincingly pushing price higher. So my thought process in that moment is, all right, I think we are waiting for a weekly fair value gap again to be traded into to then continue higher off of that. As well, take into account that a monthly expansion phase is almost being created right there. So the monthly can take it very easy. Next month, we can either consolidate or have a small retracement into the weekly fair value gap to then continue higher off of that. So that is definitely something I am taking into account as well. And overall, I like that idea more than right now trying to figure out what the daily, etc. wants to do. All right, GU right here. And GU, if anything, if we are looking to trade off the daily fair value gap, then I do quite like GU right there. Came into the 4-hour fair value gap as well, what we talked about. Just a very lack of volatility right there. As in, that's what we're seeing on a lot of pairs. Just a lack of volatility. And that could very well be the case that we're approaching the end of the year, that we need to take it a little bit easy right here. And it's the same, going to refer back to the summer right there, where it's also usually the stereotype for the summer, stereotype for December is that it's lower probability. And that is, of course, true overall seen. Doesn't mean that we can't trade at all, but we need to understand in those months right there, we need to be very careful. So if we get an early sign of something that doesn't look nice, if we get a very early sign of low probability conditions, then we just need to take a step back, because it's essentially the same thing, right? Where you have high probability months, where November overall, I would argue, was quite nice. Approaching the end of November, we could argue, well, it hasn't been that nice. But October as well, we could argue, yeah, has also been quite nice if I'm speaking for myself then. So understanding that is, again, not blowing all the profits that I made in December at the end of the year. That is setting you up for disaster going into 2024. That's not what we want to do at all. So let's finish the year strong as well. And let's try to see if we can catch a trade. But overall, keep our expectations very low, especially if we're seeing price action like this. So that is quite important as well to understand. Overall, again, I do think we can continue higher, really depending on what the dollar wants to do as well. New Zealand dollar, US dollar. So we did not come into that 4-hour VWAP gap we had right there, creating a bearish ST overall. Again, yes, those daily VWAP gaps, I do see them right there, that we can head higher off of those. Overall, do I really like it? Not really, to be honest. And again, it's just the case where we've been going higher. I'm just not too sure on what it wants to do overall and what the dollar as well wants to do right here. It's just can't really get a super clear read on it. I can say, yes, order flow bullish, intention bullish. Overall, if we're going higher, we're likely going higher off the daily VWAP gap. So that could be nice. Yes, that's true. So that potentially, there is potential in it. Let's put it that way. USD Canadian dollar, let's see. Delivered into the weekly fair value gap like we mentioned yesterday as well. So let's see actually here what it wants to do. We're getting a bullish ST. It's not necessarily a bullish ST that I want to trade off of. And the main reason for that is, again, because overall the dollar is just bearish. So if you're taking that bullish ST right there, then you are essentially betting on the dollar as well being bullish. So do I want to bet on that? Definitely not. Not right now. If we get clear signs that the dollar wants to push higher, yes, I do think there's a possibility that we can look at USD Canadian dollar longs. Overall, do not want to do anything right here. Then USD CHF as well, delivered towards the lows. Overall, again, I do think we can continue lower, but we can just see the price action hasn't been really favorable. Where in the last few weeks, we can see that the end of November just sort of slowed down and died down in volatility. Where the volatility is not really present anymore. We're struggling to creating fair value gaps right there. We're really struggling to push into premium rates to then push lower. So overall, it's just not super high probability. If we can get daily fair value gaps lower, overlapping with the lows that we just took, that could potentially be quite nice. US dollar JPY, same exact scenario. Daily fair value gaps lower could be quite nice to push price lower as well. Silver. So silver right here reached the highs as well. So ideally, I want to wait a little bit to see if we can get new clear context right there. Clear context, ideally in the form of a daily fair value gap overlapping with the highs to continue higher off of that. Gold. Let's see. Gold, I do quite like this. I do quite like the daily fair value gap that is being created right there to continue higher off of that potentially. Especially with this candle that is currently sitting right there. It's looking like it's sort of having an easy path into the daily value gap to then continue higher. So that's overall quite nice. Bitcoin, let's see. Bitcoin, again, just doing Bitcoin things right here where it's just really not that clear. And I'm waiting for the monthly value gap more so to see what it wants to do. Monthly value gap being created potentially, trading towards it, trading off of it potentially. Then on crude oil, what happened here? Let's see. On the daily time frame, all right, we are having nice price action higher potentially. So again, I mentioned a daily fair value gap higher. That could be quite nice to now continue higher prices. So if we get that, then I would definitely be interested again. Nifty is pushing price higher, and we mentioned yesterday as well, right? That Nifty, by the looks of it, doesn't really like to retrace before it actually pushes higher. So right here, this is definitely where it's likely going to take the high without any sort of retracement. So that is something to take into account if you do want to trade Nifty right there. All right. For the short list, Canadian dollar CHF currently delivered quite nicely right there. Very nice price action overall. And if we can get this 4-hour value gap lower as well right there to continue lower off of that, that could be quite nice. Let's see, daily as well. The daily value gap that is being created on after Thursday, so on Friday right there, is definitely something to take into account as well afterwards. Euro GBP. Let's see. We are creating a daily VWAP gap potentially, but again, that's on Friday to push lower off of that. So overall, it could also be quite nice. We got a nice move into that 4-hour VWAP gap. Then we swept that high during London. So that is actually quite nice price action that we're seeing right there. Let's see if we came into the high first before we came into the lows. We came into the lows first. That's a bit of a shame. But overall, quite nice delivery as well. Pretty interesting. All right, then Euro JPY. Let's see. Let's see what we are doing right here. We are potentially continuing lower. And again, we had that disrespect boundary, right? Where we sort of switched from those longs to those shorts right there. The unusual context where now we are looking for usual context. So we again had the 4-hour VWAP gap right there. We also, same as Euro GBP, what we saw, we swept this high right there. Which is really, this quite nice price action overall to then continue lower off of that. That's where usual context gets created inside that unusual context. So that is a very, very nice example right there. Looking very nice. Afterwards, we can of course look to potentially continue lower towards overlapping highs. That is what my aim would be. So the weekly VWAP gaps right there, weekly order block that we're seeing right there. Definitely this next weekly VWAP gap right there, next target. To continue lower, to potentially continue higher afterwards, but currently just being bearish with in 23 hours, we have this month VWAP gap as well that we can target right there. Quite interesting, quite nice price action as well. All right, let's take a look at the longs. Euro, Canadian dollar. Yeah, this has been a little bit of a shame, to be honest, right there, because this has not been expanding at all. So overall, this is also not something that I would want to trade. After this price action, I would highly advise at that moment, if you are in the trade, to close the trade. And that is also what I did at that moment, because I did not really like that price action, what I saw right there. So I decided, all right, let me just fully close that trade as well. Not really interested in it anymore. So this is where I would wait, ideally. Because overall, the idea is still there. We're just lacking that intention higher. We're lacking that order flow to follow through. So here, if we can get a new 4-hour VWAP gap higher and get that new context, then that could be very interesting again. Just giving it a little bit more time here. All right, EU, GU we talked about, and these we also talked about. So let's move to the waiting list. GJ, let's see. Yeah, we're having that, again, that unusual context right here, where I definitely think this right there is now the next drawn liquidity potentially. That fair value gap, the daily fair value gap. So if we can get, again, some kind of narrative, as in 4-hour fair value gap lower right there to then continue lower, that could be quite nice overall. Definitely overall, we're seeing nice, even though in a lot of pairs we mentioned at the beginning of the week, higher prices. We're seeing a lot of nice, unusual context, which is very interesting to see. I hope we all see this right there as well, that we can practice on. It's very nice price action overall. Very nice practice price action. Australian dollar, Canadian dollar, where we mentioned the same right here, where we have potentially unusual context. So these lows that are sitting right there is definitely something we can potentially look to target. I'm also going to add GBP, JPY to the short list, as well as Australian dollar, Canadian dollar. Where if we can get a 4-hour VWAP gap lower, which that is not really looking like it. If we can have fair value gaps lower to target those lows, overall could be quite nice. So I'm going to add it to the short list as well right here. Very nice. Could be nice. Australian dollar CHF. All right. So it's good that we waited a day, right? It's good that we waited a day right there for that daily VWAP gap to potentially be created, because it did not get created at all. We did the exact opposite. So right here, I just want to take a step back, where I don't really want to use the unusual context right here. And the reason for that is because overall, we also had this daily VWAP gap that we could have continued lower off of, which we just did not do. So this is more so seeking short conditions than it is that unusual context to now switch our bias. That's what I feel like, and that is not something I would want to do right here. So this is overall ready for the breakdown list right there. New Zealand dollar CHF, where we can potentially look to do the same thing right now with the unusual context. We are not creating the daily VWAP gap higher, but here it's not really seeking short conditions. So here we can just potentially look to switch that bias. very nice ST overall. If we can create new 4 alpha value gaps lower right there, could also be very, very nice to target these lows that are sitting right there. Quite interesting. Let's add it to the short list. USD Canadian dollar, don't want to do anything. GBP Canadian dollar right here. Yeah, also don't really want to do anything. It's not creating that unusual context, and it's also not continuing higher with a new daily value gap. So I'm going to add it to the breakdown list right there. CHF JPY. Let's see. We are not continuing higher like we mentioned as well, I believe, yesterday. So overall right here, what we can also see is potentially unusual context, continuing lower as well. I would need a little bit more confirmation though, because as we can see, we already tried to push lower right there off of that 4 alpha value gap, which failed to create a new fair value gap lower. So right here, I want to be a little bit more careful. Don't want to add it to the short list right here, because it's not high probability in my eyes for unusual context as well. Going to add it to the breakdown list. Australian dollar JPY. This is again the unusual context that we were talking about right there. And right now it's just a matter of, all right, we have this discount rate that we can target. Now we need to find a premium rate that we can head lower from. 4 alpha value gap, daily fair value gap, on Friday potentially. But just a 4 alpha value gap lower right there in London could be very, very nice as well. Then we're having New Zealand dollar JPY, which is pushing higher, but it's not creating a new daily fair value gap higher off of that. So overall, again, just don't really like it. Would not want to take longs off this 4 alpha value gap. Just overall don't really like this anymore. If anything, again, it's the unusual context, right? Where we have this low right now, 1 alpha value gaps lower potentially, to then target that low right there. So that is currently what I'm looking at. I'm currently not really active anymore in the market. I mean, this week. So taking a small step back right here. If anything, I do like the unusual context that we are seeing on quite a lot of pairs right there. So if I were to trade those, then I would definitely take a look at, for example, GBP JPY right there, which could overall be quite nice. All right, perfect. Thank you.